Hi everybody, it's SOH CAH Maths Tutor, and today for this video we're going to be covering what exactly sine, cosine and tangent is in relationship to a triangle, and that's what we're going to be covering. So if we've got a triangle and we just have an angle in it, and we'll put the angle down here and we'll call the angle x. How do we relate to that, the sine, cosine and tangent of that angle? Well, some of you will have seen the words SOH CAH and TOA, but what do they relate to? What does that mean? Well, let's look at the SO bit and see how that relates to this triangle. Firstly, the thing you need to know is that with a triangle there is a way of labelling the sides and giving them a name, and it always follows this convention. Convention is the word I'm looking for, and that is wherever your angle is, so our angle here, and we're just calling it x because we don't be bothered with any numbers, then the opposite side to that angle is called the opposite. The next convention is that wherever the angle is, then the longest side is always, so the longest side, and this we can see is the longest side, is always called the hypotenuse. So just to reiterate, it's always the longest side of the triangle. And then the next one is the adjacent, and the adjacent is adjacent means next to the angle itself. Now the only thing that you need to remember is that if there were another angle, so we'll put another angle in here, y, then what would be the sides in relation to y? Well, we can follow that same sort of description. What is the side that is opposite to y? Well, it's over here, it's opposite over here. So in relation to y, this is the opposite, and by a similar method of thinking about it, this is the adjacent to y. And you remember what I said at the beginning, that the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So just taking those off, just so we're looking at x. So just to reiterate, the opposite side to where the angle is the opposite. The side next to the angle is adjacent to it, and the longest side is always the hypotenuse. Now I can remember when I started learning about this about 5 million years ago is when I began to learn maths. The whole sine, cosine, what does that mean? And it just was like magic. It was like Hogwarts magic. I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I learnt the SOH CAH TOA thing. I just didn't really get it then, but when I've been thinking about it, and let's just look at the SO bit of SOH CAH TOA. And by the way, I write SOH CAH TOA like this. I write it with an S, a little h up the top, and then, sorry, a little O up the top, and then an H like that. And CAH is exactly the same. I write CAH like that, and TOA I write like that, and there's a reason for that, and it's because what that means to me is, and this is decoding this little SOA thing, is that the sine of the, or sometimes you might even see it written with an E on the air there, but the sine equals, so this is the S bit here, equals the opposite, which is this bit here, over, see the way I've written the O over the H? Well, that's for this purpose here, over the hypotenuse. And that's what the sine is. Decoding the CAH bit of SOH CAH TOA, it is the cosine equals, so that's the C, the cosine equals the adjacent, which is the A bit, and again the way I've written it, over, because it's higher than the h, over the hypotenuse. So it's an easy decode. And you can do the tangent TOA in a similar way. Here I've put the triangle with the labels up, hypotenuse, opposite and adjacent, and I've also put up a triangle with two sides on it. And again, we're going to focus on the SOA bit here. So let's just again recap on that, what that is. So I've got SOA, which I write personally as SOA, like that. So that means the sine equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So all I have to do now is put in the numbers, and so the opposite, which is here, goes in as 1, and the hypotenuse, which is here, goes in here. So the sine of, in fact we're talking about the sine of x here, sine of x equals a half. So what that means to us is that we've converted this horribleness here, SOA the way I write it, and sine of an angle equals whatever, and all we've done is we've just turned it into a very simple thing. We've turned it into a number, and that's it. So that's all sine is. It's a code, if you like. It's a way of describing an angle with two numbers. In our particular case, the opposite over the hypotenuse. And it gives us a number, which usually turns up, and as you'll see, is pretty much always some sort of fraction, and that is it. That's all sine is. It's just a couple of numbers to describe the angle. And you could do exactly the same for cosine and exactly the same for tangent. Just literally see the sides and put the numbers in, and that is it. So we found out the sine of x equals a half. But what does the angle actually, what is the angle? We know the sine of x, the sine of that angle x is a half, but what's the actual angle? Well, this is where you're going to need your calculator, and you've worked out that sine of x equals a half. Now the great news is that on your calculator there is a button for undoing this to find out the angle, and you'll see that your calculator may be different, but generally there are a set of buttons here which are sine, cos and tan. But if you look just above here, you've got buttons that are sine to the -1, which is just here, cos to the -1 and tan to the -1, and they undo this effect. They undo the sine and tell you what the angle would be in relation to a half. So all we need to do is we punch into our calculator, and you may need to try this, but you're going to push in something like, and you'll see that on this one you actually have to do shift and then press the sine button. It gives you sine to the -1. You'll do sine to the -1 of a half. Now if you do that, the answer will come out as 30 degrees. And there you go. You've undone the number to tell you what the angle is. And that works exactly the same for sine, cos and tan. And that is it. That's how to generate what the sine of an angle is, and how to undo that process to give you the angle. And that would be it. So as an example of that, let's say that in this triangle, which I've left labelled up with hypotenuse, opposite and adjacent, the opposite side is of length 1 and the hypotenuse is of length 4. So let's do our little thing here. So, which is the same as the sine of x equals the opposite, which we know is 1, that's this bit here, over the hypotenuse, which is this bit here, Let's get my colour sorted out, which is 4. And then all we do is we go into our calculator, we start using the buttons which are just here, do the inverse sine, because that's what the sine to the -1 is called. So we do sine -1, you've put this in your calculator, of a quarter, and you may have different ways of doing it, but roughly it will be this, and you'll come up with the answer that x is 15 degrees. And that, my friends, is it. Thank you very much. You've been watching and listening to the SOH Math Tutor. Any questions, any comments, anything you need any help with, then just put it down in the comments box and I shall respond. Thank you very much.